Mr. Woodford. Today we're going to be talking about word problems and in specific how to add integers with word problems. So as we dive into it, as usual, let's look at the worksheet. If you are joining me online, feel free to access the worksheet on your Google Classroom page. All right. So we're going to talk about adding word problems, right? Adding integers from word problems. And we're going to discuss words that indicate addition or subtraction. Now, word problems is a big challenge to a lot of people. And the reason why is because interpreting English into math and math symbols can be difficult. So to start off, how about you take a second to read the bell work and see if you can turn all four of these problems or all four of these statements into integers. What numbers do you think they are? Are they positive? Are they negative? And what numbers do you believe they should be? Okay, so take a moment, pause the video here, and try to answer this problem. All right, now I'm hoping you had enough time to be able to answer these bell work problems. I want to go over them as well and write down what I believe the answers are. Normally, I would have the answers pop on the screen for you, but I believe because these are word problems, it's best that I do go over them with you. Now, when I look at the first one here, I notice it says a diver descended 20 meters. The key word here, and it's important when you're reading word problems that you can identify the keywords. So the keyword for this particular problem, and I'm not sure it's my, right? So the keyword here for the first one is the word descended. So if you have a highlighter, I would highlight this word descended, or you can underline as well. Let's look at all the keywords first before we write the integers. An elevator ride down 27 stories. A $700 profit. Now, if you don't know what profit is, don't worry. When I come to write the actual integer here, I'll take a second to actually talk about what profit means. Gain, right? A gain of 12 yards, right? So these are the keywords that indicate an operation, whether addition or subtraction here, but they do indicate an operation. A diver descended 20 meters, that's going to be descended, which in this case is a negative thing. It goes down. So it's a negative here or indicating subtraction. So if I were to write this as an integer, it would be negative 20. An elevator ride down 27 stories. Once again, this word down is indicating subtraction or a negative. So in this case, we're going to say, okay, because I see the word down, that means minus 27. And you should be able to identify the opposite of these as well. Because if there's subtraction, you know the opposite of subtraction, or rather, let's use math terms. The inverse of subtraction is addition. So the opposite or the inverse of descended would be ascended. The inverse of down would be up. A $700 profit. Profit is indicating gain or it's indicating addition. It's indicating adding. It's indicating you increased, right, by a certain amount. And those other words I use are the operation addition. Right, so in this case, we would write positive 700. Now, normally when you write integers, you don't need to write the positive symbol. You just make sure you don't write a negative. It indicates a positive. Now, what's the opposite of profit? What's the opposite of profit? If you don't know, it could be debt. It could be withdrew, right? These are words that may indicate, right, the opposite of profit. If someone's in debt, if someone withdrew a certain amount of money, that indicates a subtraction rather than an addition when it comes to math and money terms. A gain of 12 yards, and as you guys should be aware, gain, even if you don't play football, indicates a positive. Okay, so now this is what the bell work is, and it's important that we identify keywords. I want to walk you through an example where I'm going to show you in the last couple lessons, I showed you how to add and subtract numbers with counters. I showed you how to add and subtract numbers with absolute value. Today I want to show you how to add and subtract numbers, right, or really add integers, because that's what we've been talking about. Subtraction, we're going to go into the next lesson. But we're talking about adding integers with a number line. Now, after I show you how to do a number line, for the rest of this lesson, independent practice, it's optional if you decide to use the number line. But I do want to make sure I cover it to show you, and I know you've learned in prior grades as well. But let's go down to the modeling. Now, one thing about word problems is they all are based on real world problems, right? So in this case, the temperature was 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is below zero. So 2 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. The temperature drops by 5 degrees. What is the temperature now? So the first thing when I read a word problem is I read it all the way through. The next thing is I'm going to read it again, and this time I'm going to highlight or underline the important information. So I read it one time through just to get a feel of what they're talking about. I know they're talking about temperature. I know it sounds like it's going up or down. I know there's stuff going on here. But now I'm going to read it the second time, and I'm going to highlight what's important. Those important keywords that may indicate addition, that may indicate subtraction. So it says the temperature was 2 degrees below zero. I see that word below. I'm going to highlight, not only below, I'm actually going to highlight the 2 degrees as well. 2 degrees below zero. I'm going to highlight all of that. Then it says the temperature drops by 5 degrees. So I'm going to highlight drops by 5 degrees. What is the temperature now? Now, I know the things I highlighted, that is the important information. Those indicate some integers that I'm going to need to use in order to solve this problem, and that's going to be great. Now, the way that I set up this particular worksheet is I'm going to actually walk you through step by step some things that should be happening in your mind as you're reading. The first question is, okay, what is the initial temperature? What is this initial temperature? What is the initial temperature? Now, for some of you guys, you're like, okay, what does that word initial mean, Mr. Warford? This word initial, and I'm going to just write a little arrow over here just to indicate what this means. This is like beginning, all right? When you hear the word initial, you can think of beginning or starting, right? Or I'm going to write starting as well, right? So initial is indicating beginning or starting. So in other words, if I were to substitute now these two words, what is the starting temperature written as an integer? What is the beginning temperature written as an integer? Right. So when I hear the word initial, I need to be thinking, okay, what is the beginning? What is that starting number? Okay. So in other words, what is the initial temperature written as an integer? Where did the temperature start? It says the temperature was 2 degrees below zero. Now keep in mind that word was. Was is a past tense word, which means that kind of indicates beginning. So when you read a word problem, try to think about, okay, what is it telling me now, then, present, past? Because that's going to help you to really understand where the beginning was and then where it is now. Okay, so in this case, that word is telling you at the beginning, it was 2 degrees below zero. So 2 degrees below zero, do I write that as a 2? And you would probably say right now, no, Mr. Warford, you're not writing it as a 2 because this is below. That keyword below indicates a negative, right? And we know zero. If it's below zero, if zero's here and it's below zero, you guys should be aware up and down, that means it's going to be in the negatives. So it's going to start at -2. Now, for those who are a little more visual, you can see I added an actual thermometer here. And you can see where the temperature is on here, -2. Right? That's the beginning temperature right there, -2. And that's kind of how it would look on a thermometer, where all the red mercury is right here. And, and it's empty up top. But it's showing us it's at -2. That is the initial temperature. Now, I'm going to mark the initial temperature also on this number line. So I'm just going to mark a nice straight line right here. And that's indicating where it started. Okay, so if you're using a number line, keep in mind you want to hit a mark of where it's starting. Now, this particular number line is vertical, but you should also remember that number lines can also be horizontal. In more cases than not, you have been more accustomed to horizontal number lines than vertical. But I do want to go over something before we keep going. Now, with horizontal or vertical number lines, you can see that above or at the top, or if you move up, that indicates positive. If you move down, that indicates negative. Now, on a horizontal number line, and I'm going to quickly try to draw one right here. Right? If this was 0, you know if I move this direction to the right, that's indicating positive. Whereas if I move to the left, that's indicating negative. That's just something to keep in mind as you go. But in this case, I would have started right here, right? And then based on wherever we move, we would go in that direction, right? Left meaning negative, right meaning positive. Okay, let's keep going. So we marked the initial temperature on the number line. It says a drop in 5 degrees, right? So this next term that's in our word problem, drops by 5 degrees, is actually like adding -5 to the temperature. So I would write this as an actual expression. It would be -2 plus -5. And we're used to seeing this, right? We can draw out the dots and the shades. We could do the absolute value of both. Notice that they're the same sign, negative, negative. So if you notice that they're both negative, you should also be in agreement that the answer should be negative, right? But let's do it on the number line. So let's count the number to find the final temperature. So it's dropping by -5. So let's actually go down 5 here. And I'm just going to do little jumps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it should end up right here. This should be where your number line would stop, or rather where the temperature would go. Okay, so this is our new temperature, right? And if you want, I'm gonna put a little star here. It's meant to be a star, saying that that's where the new temperature is. Now, what is that number as an integer? What number is between -6 and -8? What number is between -6 and -8? And keep in mind, we're talking about integers. Integers are not fractions and they're not decimals, right? So that should indicate that the number there is going to be -7. All right. This is one technique of using a number line to be able to solve a problem like this, right? Where in this case, we're adding the same sign, similar to our lesson 1.1, right? But however, when we go to add them on a number line, you start where you're starting. And even if that number line was horizontal, let's say this is -2 here, and mark it. And then I'm going to add -5, but because it's negative, I'm going to be going to the left, okay? And when we do that, we'll end up at the next number, which in this case will be -7. Now, the last thing I want you to understand is when we read, when we're doing word problems or real world problems, you should also be able to interpret it in terms of real world language. So the last thing is asking you, well, is the temperature above or below 0, right? Did the temperature go higher? Did it go lower? What's going on with it? And that's how you would interpret when someone actually further dive in terms of the language here. You would say, well, the temperature is below 0, right? The temperature is below 0. It didn't go above it because some of you might have thought, okay, we're going to add 5 this way because it's adding 5, but it's not adding 5, it's adding -5. So it's really going down. Or another way to look at this is -2. Right? Another way to look at this as well is to look at this as -2 minus 5. But as I showed you guys in the previous lesson, I'd rather you change this, keep change, and make sure you add that -5, right? Change it to look more addition than subtraction. But to answer this last question, it is below 0. It is still below 0. All right? What I want you to do is I want you to carefully read the independent practice problems that you have. And I believe actually there are some reflection questions before I jump on and thinking about that. Take a second to read these reflection questions and to think on them. I want you to really take a second and think, what if, suppose the temperature is -1 and it drops by 3 degrees? Explain how would you use this number line? How would you use a number line to find the new temperature? What would you do? Now, the number line can be vertical, it can be horizontal, either one you prefer, but I want you to think about it. -1 drops by 3. Explain how we use the number line. Second question, how would you use a number line to find the sum, 2 plus 5? And matter of fact, how would actually using a number line to find the sum of 2 plus 5 be different from using a number line to find -2 plus -5? What are the differences with 2 plus -5 and -2 plus -5 when it comes to the number line, right? Take a second to reflect and think about that and try to figure out, okay, well, what's the difference between these two when I'm looking at a number line? And how would I do that on a number line? After you've done your reflections, what I want you to do is working independent practice. Read each one of these carefully. As I mentioned, read the word one time and then read again and highlight the important information. Then begin to create your scenario that you're looking at. All right, take your time. Some of these can be a little bit tricky. For example, number 3, a deep sea ship exploring is pulling up a driver at a rate of 25 feet per minute. So the ship is coming up. The driver currently is 200 feet below sea level. Is a current word, not a password. You need to figure out where he was originally. Where was he at in the beginning? How deep was the driver 10 minutes ago? Was and ago indicates that's going to indicate where he was originally. Okay? And then you could be able to do your subtraction from where he currently is. Okay? All right. So take your time, read through them all, complete the independent practice, complete the homework. And I'm looking forward to seeing all your completed work. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. Hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to put your questions in Google Classroom. Look forward to talking to you in person. Have a great day.